Yep, done.
Cool. Lovely. Is that coming up for everyone there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, so thanks, John, and thanks everybody for logging on this evening. It's great to have an opportunity to talk through some of this stuff, because I honestly think it'll really benefit you guys as you progress along the pathway to kind of understand it a little bit deeper, rather than just turning up to a Monday night or a Wednesday night session at Kildare and just kind of going through the program and going through the motions. I honestly think that you could benefit a lot just from understanding kind of what the athletic development pathway is, and kind of how that progresses over time, so it doesn't seem like you're just going to do whatever program on that evening and there's no thought behind it. There's a lot of planning that goes behind a lot of this between myself and the other athletic development coaches in the pathway, and obviously Mark leading there in the North Midlands. So first of all, if we just touch on what is athletic development. So for people that aren't aware of what athletic development is, it's basically physical training, which basically starts with fundamental and sport-specific movement skills, but also includes things like mobility, speed and agility, strength, power, hypertrophy, and conditioning. So other people might call it strength and conditioning, but as you can see from that slide there, there's probably a little bit more to it just than strength and conditioning. Or some people might call it athletic performance or physical preparation. There's a lot of different words that we use, but I think for us as a department, we like athletic development because it's a development program that we run within our pathway with our age grade program. So it's very much aimed at developing over time. So for us, it's not really too important how you guys perform in 5 days, 5 weeks, or 5 months. The real end goal for us as a long-term athletic development pathway is how you guys are in 5 years' time. So that's why we stick to the term athletic development rather than just strength and conditioning. So tonight, the reason why we're having this presentation is basically to talk you through 3 things around our pathway. So the why, the what, and the how. And like I said, it's very easy to just turn up on whatever evening, it's a Monday or Wednesday at Kildare, and go in to do your session, clock out, not think about it again. But there's a lot that goes on behind it, and I think the understanding, as I said, will really help you guys. So it's very important you understand why you're doing what you're doing. So what's the vision of the program? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And then also what's the strategy behind it? So if we can have this kind of overall vision, but how are we actually going to go about getting there as well? So that'll also include the tactics as well. So I'll start off talking through the why and the what, and then Mark's going to take over and talk a little bit more about the detail and the how, which is very applicable to the type of work that you guys are going to be doing with him. So this slide, it basically says always start with why. And I suppose, although it's a really dark time in terms of we're not being able to train together and we're having to do everything remotely and stuff, it does afford us the opportunity for us to spend a little bit of time on the why, like I said, instead of just focusing on the how. So it's really good to get this opportunity to talk to you guys about the rationale behind the program that you guys are going to be doing. So why do we do this physical development or athletic development? So basically what we're looking to do is develop physical characteristics, and those characteristics are the things I talked about on that previous slide. So what is your mobility like? What's your speed and agility like? What's your strength, your power, your fitness, your conditioning? And how can we develop that as a department? So with the athletic development coaches in the pathway. And we know from the research that the physical characteristics you guys have will differentiate between age groups. So it'll obviously increase as you guys progress along the pathway from under 16s to under 18s to 19s to 20s. But there's also some research to suggest that your physical characteristics can differentiate between being part of a North Midlands group and also being part of like a YSP group that meet in NACE. So that's select youth players. And also within those groups, so even within the youth select players who goes on to be selected from the sub academy, there's a real strong relationship between physical characteristics like how strong you are and how fast you are, how fit you are, to kind of development along that pathway and progression along the pathway, because that's the major aim of our whole pathway, is to get as many of you guys through the youth system into that blue jersey at the end of it. And then ultimately it's to maximize rugby performance. So we're looking to physically prepare you for the demands of the game. So whatever the demands are at your respective age group or playing standard, that's what we're looking to get you ready for. So what we want to do is to make sure that you can run a little bit faster, that you can jump a little bit higher, that you can hit your tackles a little bit harder, and you can push further and further. So everything that we do within our program is centered around maximizing that performance on the rugby pitch. But it'll also have some knock-on effects onto other sports that you guys do. So whether you're involved with Gaelic football, hurling, football, basketball, because our program centers around fundamental movement skills, there's a lot of crossover that'll also help in performance in other sports as well. But our main goal is obviously to get you prepared for the rugby pitch. Another aim of the program is to reduce injury risk. And although we can't get rid of all the risk, it's a collision sport. Because of the contact nature of rugby, we can't eliminate all the risk, but there are certain things that we can do to reduce your risk. So some of the work that you guys might do around your mobility or your blue zone stuff that you do with Mark, to really focus on making you as robust as possible so that we can reduce some of that risk. And then also just developing general strength, general conditioning and speed can also help protect you against spikes in workload. So like if you have a couple of games in a week, or if you have a really intense period of training, the fitter we are going into there, to reduce injury risk. And that's why it's really important over the next 6 weeks or however long this kind of lockdown is going to last, is to make sure that we're maximizing that time with Mark on the online sessions. So that when we do return to rugby, we can reduce that injury risk and avoid too much time on the sideline. We also know from the research that junior rugby is getting more and more physical. And over the last 12 or 15 years, some research out there to show that junior rugby players, so under 19s, 20s, are 20% heavier, 50% stronger, and 7% faster. So if you think about what that means in terms of collisions and the impacts that you guys are have to be going through, it's very important that we take time to really go through a well-planned and progressed athletic development program to make sure our bodies are capable of sustaining some of these impacts. So it's a real player welfare issue as well as just a general injury risk. And then outside of the performance realm, there's a lot of general health benefits of resistance training and athletic development as well. So you've obviously got your physical development there. If you're stronger and fitter, like I said, it links into other sports, but it also links into movement health. And as you progress through age, I know it's not going to be at the forefront of your minds in your teenage years, but as you get older, and you have these fundamental movement skills and stuff, it helps your body actually function as you go through age. And it's not just a physical thing as well. There's a real mental aspect to it as well. So getting involved in athletic development programs can really help on the mental side of things as well, in reducing stress, anxiety, depression, and it's good for socializing as well. So there's a lot of general health benefits to it as well. And it all comes down to the mission statement of the Centre of Excellence. So the Centre of Excellence is what used to be called the Sub Academy. So it's kind of that stage of after you leave school, before you go into an academy environment. The Centre of Excellence, the aim of this on our pathway is to develop people that are capable of thriving in a high performance environment. And there's a lot of thought that goes behind those words there. You can see there that people's kind of highlighted there, but it's not about developing rugby players that are capable of thriving in a high performance rugby environment. Unfortunately, not everybody on this call is going to go on to play at senior level for Leinster. So there's a real push from our pathway to develop the person first and develop characteristics and skills within each individual that helps them to maximize the performance in whatever environment that they go to. So hopefully most of you guys want to play high level rugby, but whether you go into finance or IT or building or whatever it is, we want to help you guys be the best and just thrive in these environments, not just survive. So it's a real person first approach that we try to take. So that's the overall vision of the program. So what I want to talk about next is the what of the program. So the strategy that we use to help guide you towards that vision. But before we do that, if we just think about what the research shows us about teenage rugby players. So there's some research out there that showed within school age rugby players, if they're left to their own devices and don't kind of get involved within a structured supervised program, they generally train 1 or 2 times per week in the gym. and that'll look maybe 70 to 90 minutes. So it might be an hour or two 45-minute sessions that they do in a week. It's not really planned or thought out, and it's generally 1 or 2 lower limb exercises and 2 to 4 upper limb exercises. So they're doing twice as much upper body as they are lower body. And I know a lot of people on the call will say, well, they'd love to do bench press and they'd love to do bicep curls. But if you think about this as an athletic development point and go back to what we are saying we're trying to achieve with these programs in terms of maximize performance, developing physical characteristics and reducing injury risk, do you guys think this type of program is going to prepare you to the best of your ability to progress along the pathway? And I'd suggest that probably most of you will agree that it's not going to be ideal. So from a Leinster rugby standpoint, this is what we think you should be doing. So as you can see on the picture on the right hand side, there's a lot of different movements and stuff, and that comes back to that central idea around developing movement skill first, so fundamental and sport specific movement skills. So we try and get you guys in loads of different movements and different planes of motion to get you used to a lot of different things rather than just focusing on the same things all the time. And what we'd like to see is 2 to 4 times a week engaging in some sort of athletic development. And that doesn't mean that it has to be 2 to 4 times a week all through the year. It's going to vary on the stage of the season. Obviously, academic commitments that you guys have, you might have exams and different periods where it might be less than this. But 2 to 3 hours would be really beneficial for your athletic development over time. The program should be planned, so there should be some sort of thought behind it and some progression along the way. And we'd like to see a little bit more balance between the lower and upper limb exercises, because although it's fun to do the upper limb stuff, a lot of the injury risk prevention stuff is more important on the lower limb, and it has more crossover to the things that I talked about, like getting faster, jumping higher, and hitting harder. So this is just an overview of our athletic development pathway. So the first stage that you guys will come into, irrelevant of whatever age group you're in, you'll spend a bit of time developing your movement skills competency. So what I mean by that is there's some general movement skills that we think that we need to develop your coordination, your balance, and your technical ability to go through it before we start loading or adding weight to those exercises. And once we as a development staff are happy with how you're progressing within your movement, we'll start progressing people into stage 2. So stage 2 is where we start adding a little bit more load or weight to the movements and developing things like work capacity or hypertrophy. So for those who haven't heard of hypertrophy before, it's basically just developing lean mass or muscle mass. So once we've developed a bit of muscle mass and a bit of work capacity, so our bodies are able to take the stress of that little bit of load and we're still moving well, we can progress to stage 3, which is strength development. And this is a really important part and a big part of our pathway. A lot of people don't even get to stage 4 along the pathway until they do reach the academy stage. So we really need to be making sure that everybody's moving well first. They can handle the stress under a little bit of load, and then we can start loading a bit more into strength and developing relative strength. And then once we have that foundation in strength, then we can start working on power, so progressing to that stage 4. So this pathway isn't exactly linear. It doesn't really go by like your age group. So it's not as simple as under 16s movement skills, under 17s work capacity, 18s is strength, and 19s is power development. It really depends on where you guys are at in terms of your own athletic development. So we might have some of you guys on the call on an under 18 age group that are already at the strength development stage, or we might have some at under 18 level that are coming fresh, that haven't really done a lot of structured athletic development, and you're going to have to start back at movement skills. And there's some people that even come into the sub-academy or center of excellence when they've left school at 19s or 20s, and they're starting off at stage 1 as well. So it's not exactly fixed. And Mark will talk a little bit more about that and how. And the reason why it's not fixed, and we really insist on everybody moving well first, it links to the center of excellence. So excellence is doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. So we could rush you through the pathway and get you lifting loads of weight, but moving really poorly, and it's ultimately going to end badly and probably put you at more risk of injury than do you any good. So although a lot of the stuff that we do may look simple and it's not going to hit highlight reels on YouTube or get a lot of social media attention, there's a lot of reason why we do that, and we're really driving that excellence in doing the ordinary things. So nailing the basics, moving well first, slowly progressing that load, getting strong, then getting powerful. Because it's a long-term development plan. It's that 5 years, like I said, it's not a real short-term game for us. And how we do that is we deliver appropriate training. And what I mean by appropriate training is it's appropriate for you as an individual. So it takes into your characteristics. So those characteristics may be your chronological age. So how old are you? You're 16, 17, 18. What's your biological age? So where are you in terms of your physical maturation? What's your training age? So how many years have you been engaged in a structured athletic development program? What's your gender? So are you a male or female? And what that means for your actual session. Then also we take in things into account like fitness and fatigue status. So what have you done before and what are you expected to do later? How are you feeling on the day that you come in? Have you played a match yesterday or have you a big match tomorrow? Are you going to go out and train straight after this session? So we take things like that into consideration as well. We also take into consideration things like your training history and injury history as well. So are there things within the program that are going to aggravate previous injuries? Do we need to modify anything around your current injury status? And then as you develop along the pathway, we try and get a little bit more input from you guys in terms of your personal preference and what you guys enjoy to do. So although in the early stages, stage 1 and stage 2, when we're trying to nail the basics, you mightn't get too much input into what Mark actually delivers on a day-to-day basis. But as you go through stage 3 and stage 4, and you've kind of earned the right along the pathway, and Mark knows you and he knows that he can trust you, we can have a little bit more confidence in giving you guys a little bit more leeway and autonomy in what you do in terms of your program. We apply progressive overload. So this is Milo. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Greek myth of Milo. Basically, he started off lifting a calf, and over time, as the calf grew into a bigger and bigger bull, he gets bigger and stronger over time. So that's that real long-term athletic development plan. So it's not about sticking 10 or 20 kilos onto whatever lift you're doing week in, week out. It's about those small increases over time. So adding half a kilo week on week, and that really does build up to a lot of weight over time. So it's about having that patience and not trying to rush the process. And then also giving yourself enough time to recover in between sessions as well. So it's not about doing as much as you can all the time. It's about being smart in your training and making sure that you make the most out of your sessions, give yourself time to recover before you go again. We're really big on providing quality coaching. So there's a drive from us to provide not just competent, but really passionate coaches at each of our regions and whatever squads we're using within our pathway that are really interested in the long-term athletic development. So we try and work with coaches that aren't using youth athletic development as a stepping stone to the professional game. We really try and get guys that are involved because they're really interested in developing new players over time. So Mark's a great example of that. Obviously, he has a background working within the school system as well. He's helped with the summer programs. So we're really lucky to be working with such great caliber coaches within the pathway. And we know from some of the research that having great coaches and passionate coaches can also deliver much greater results. So if I give one person a program and tell them to go away and do it, and I give another person the same program but give them a good coach, you can see here from squat, bench press, chin up, or counter movement jump, there's much greater increases over time using the same program by having a quality coach in the room. And another bonus of having a good coach in the room is avoiding these negative consequences. So we've a big drive at leaving your ego at the door. And like I said, not just trying to throw on as much weight on the bar as you can and try put on a bit of bravado or whatever. It's really about nailing those basics, because poor lifting technique or insufficient strength level actually compromises your training and increases your likelihood of injury. So it goes against everything that we set out with that vision. And along the way, there is a lot of information that we collect on you guys as a group of individuals. So whether that's kind of pre-training questionnaires that Mark might use to see how you guys are feeling or what kind of load you guys are working on. And then also in terms of like physical testing, so whether it's a Bronco test or a jump test. But what I really want to get hammer home is that just doesn't all go and sit on a shelf. It actually informs what we do as a development staff. So we don't collect any information that we don't actively use to inform our training. So although sometimes it can feel like a burden for you filling some of the stuff out or doing some of the testing, it's all ultimately to aid in your development over time and really tailor the program to make sure it's appropriate for you. And this is kind of just a case study of how that all ties in together. So the kind of vision and the strategy over time. So this is real data from one of our current academy players. So he's in the second year of his academy now, and he came through the youth system. So you can see it under 17, he's into the club system, and because he's in stage 1, there's no real numbers that we collect in terms of the physical profile. And so at that stage, because it's really movement focused, there's not a lot we really look for in the numbers. But as you can see, from under 18s, he starts moving into that stage 2, so developing that work capacity or hypertrophy. And then a year later, he goes into his strength phase, so that's stage 3 in under 19s. And you can see from that time, he doesn't get any taller, but he's stuck on about 9 kilos of mass. But even with that extra 9 kilos, he's jumping 4 centimeters higher. He's reduced his bronco time by a few seconds, which doesn't look too impressive. But if you think about if he ran that one at under 18s with an extra 10 kilos on his back, that time might be a little bit higher. And you can see from some of his strength measures there, we've had a good increase in strength, even though we haven't been focused on strength for too long. And then when you go to under 20s level, you can see again, he's put on another 11 kilos. He's still jumping higher, and he's made further improvements with his bronco. So relative to his body mass, he's a lot fitter and a lot more powerful. And we have a lot stronger kind of strength profile there as well. So what we want to get across from you, although sometimes it feels like things are going slowly, there's method behind it. And we really need that patience to think about that long-term vision and not try and rush it as we go along. So with that, I will pass you over to Mark, and he'll talk a little bit more about the specifics and how that actually looks on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis.
Cool. Could I be made a host there just so I can share the screen? Perfect. Sorry, hold on 1 second. Sorry about this. There we go. Sorry. Right. So basically, just what I'm going to talk about is that process that we just basically went through there on the case study. So basically, from that under 17s right the way to under 20s, and hopefully beyond that, and what we sort of look for at each stage, whether that be the movement skills and all that sort of stuff. Okay. So the first one, stage 1, as Pork said, movement skills competency. Okay. So what we're basically looking for here is just those fundamental movement and basic skills that everyone has. A lot of you guys already play a good few sports, whether that be rugby, soccer, all that sort of stuff. But we now want to be able to make those movements specific to tasks in the weight room and then on the rugby pitch as well. Okay, so as you can see, there's sort of 8 examples there: your squat, hinge, push, pull, bridge, lunge, brace, and rotate. So even on Monday, on those Zoom sessions, we would have went through a lot of those. And the lads who have had in the gym, it's all those, even within those half an hour sort of time slots, we've got through a lot of that work with the push, pull, hinge, and bracing, etc. Okay. So a sample of a session here being out of that first movement skill stage. So a lot will depend on what us as coaches see you at and what position you're in. So let's say your squat there, for example, we'll more than likely start you on something like a goblet squat. So we won't put you under a bar straight away. We need you to be able to be comfortable in those squat and hip hinge patterns and all that sort of stuff before we start putting weight on the bar. So your upper body push, that might be as simple as a push up. Very simple lunge patterns, so not a lot of weight, but getting you movement comfortable. Then second stage here, so work capacity and hypertrophy. Okay, so chronological age, 15, 16, and 17, which most of you are already. But what we as athletic development coaches look at is more that training age. Okay, So we want you guys to be comfortable within those movement patterns that we've talked about from that stage one before we start putting any work capacity or trying to build muscle on you. Okay, so if we already have poor movement strategies and we start to try load you guys, so put you guys under a bar, or put too much weight on the bar, your body will already try to start adapting and, as we say, suboptimal movement strategies that won't be ideal for longer term development. Okay, so if you start and you're not proficient in what you're trying to do and you start putting weight on the bar, it's actually quite difficult down the line to fix that. So patience is really key in this phase here, and we're not rushing into anything. We're going to get you, as it says there, technical objectives to be confidence or competency on all your lifts. Same thing, really being confident in everything that you do. Behavioral objective then, autonomy in your warm-ups. So like coming in, obviously I have the stuff written on the board before your warm-up, or some other lads might have it printed out. We haven't really got that far yet, but being able to come in and know what you're supposed to be doing for each session. And then the use of spotting partners obviously is, again, that's something we'll get to as we move through. Education wise then, names of exercises and equipment. Again, it will come. It's quite hard at the moment because we only have our 30 minutes, so we're keeping it fairly simple. Your muscle groups, and then obviously understanding the training principles. So as Porrick said earlier, the progressive overload. And then as we're looking at a sample session for this, so as you can see, there's a bit more on it from the previous one. So we're trying to get you into that work capacity. We're trying to get you to do your squats, supersetted with other stuff. So you're really refining those movement skills and getting it over and over. So 5 sets of 10 and 10. So you might think it's a lot of work compared to the first one, but again, we're trying to get you as competent as possible so we can eventually move you on to the next stage. So your bilateral hinge, that means 2 legs with a lunge, horizontal push, horizontal pull, vertical push, vertical pull. So we're getting everything in one session, really going over and over again. It might seem boring, but it's the best way to be doing it. So stage 3 then, again, chronological age, you're looking at 16 to 18, but again, as coaches, we're really looking at that training age, so 6 to 12 months. Okay, so what do we mean by training age of 6 to 12 months? Really, we kind of want you guys to be able to, or to be in a pathway or have trained for 6 to 12 months with a strength coach or a development coach like us. Okay, technical objective, really competent at your high loads. So being really comfortable with those movement patterns, can do the movement without really thinking about it. So we can put a good bit of weight on the bar and load you in those positions. And once we sort of think that you're ready for that stage, we can start looking towards build targets, as Porrick said, like relative to your body. And then an intro to plyometrics. So plyometrics is your jumping and landing stuff. And we would have done very basic stuff on the pitch. I know some of you might feel weird when you're doing you might feel weird. You're jumping and landing, all that sort of stuff. But that plyometrics, which is basically getting your body used to being able to use the stretch shortening stuff within your muscles to basically create more force, which is what we look for in strength development. Okay, in terms of we're going to be safe and know how to be safe. So that's all the basic stuff, like using your spotters from the previous stage there, pins, collars so that weights don't fall off, and obviously correct apparel. So the obvious ones is that, like, you're coming in with your t-shirts and shorts, you're not wearing anything that's too restrictive. And then the other side of it, I've sort of mentioned to a few of you guys in with the 17s when we were doing our squats, and those big running runners with really large bits of like what they call it, cushioning underneath. It sort of really makes your feet unstable, especially when you're under high load. You want to have a really good base of support. Okay, so even you can see on the picture there, I think it's Dave Carney doing a bench. You can see that he's wearing those weightlifting shoes. So I'm not saying go out and get them, but something that has a really flat base. Your ankles basically aren't all over the place, and it makes it a lot lot more safer than roads. In terms of education, we've sort of done a very, very small bit of it with the lads. We started sort of looking at what you're doing every week for your. Again, we're not trying to put weight on too quickly here. We want to be able to make sure that you're competent in everything you're doing. And again, further understanding of those training programs. So why are we looking at strength development? What it's going to do for you down the line and all that sort of stuff. In terms of a sample session then, so as you can see, the sort of overall workload is pulled back a bit. So it's not supersetting. There's not 8 exercises. It's pretty much 4. So we're going back to just your basic squat. So at this stage, you're probably looking at a front squat or something similar. And the reps have come right down. So 6 reps, but we're having the intensity is a lot higher. So we're putting more weight on the bar. Your upper body push is something like a bench press and hinge, RDLs and that sort of stuff. Okay, so the intensity is higher, but the overall volume is much lower. And then sort of the final stage or power development. Okay, obviously some of you or most of you will probably be a couple of years away from this, even age-wise, 18 to 21. As you can see there, the training age is 2 years minimum. So once we spent that 2 years sort of building a strength base, then only can we really look at building or looking for power development. When we're looking at power development, right, we're looking to move our own body or the weight that we're doing at a really, really high speed and in explosive ways. So as you can see there, the technical objective is competency with high speed and explosive plyometrics, okay? It requires a bit of a skill element, so that's why it does take that long. In terms of all that training you're doing, you're sort of working to be able to have really, really good movement patterns that you can now do it with high speed and be comfortable to be able to do that. In terms of your behavioral objective, it's more collaboration with the coach, obviously. So at this stage, we want you guys as athletes to sort of have an awareness of what you feel like you need to work on, whether that comes from your rugby coach or where we sit down and have a conversation of where we feel you need to improve if you want to keep going on. So it's a more of an overall collaboration between the athlete and the athletic development coach. In terms of education, then again, exactly as it says there, autonomy in mobility and prehab. Hopefully, if you make it to this stage, you'll have pretty much an access to physio, so that you know what you need to work on, how to stay injury free, and then in terms of an ability to adjust your loadings independently, so you don't have to do exactly what it says. If you feel like you're a bit more fatigued one day compared to another, you do what you can work off, and you have to really earn that right over that 2 years minimum of working with myself, so that we now have the trust that you can work whatever way you need to work for that day. In terms of a sample session then, you can see here a hand clean derivative, so we wouldn't have gone anywhere near that, and we won't more than likely. The tempo is explosive, so again, you're really trying to move that bar as quickly as you can, and as you can see there, the reps are 3, so it's really, really, really high intensity stuff, but a really, really high skillful stuff as well, so it takes a while before you even get there. But then on the other side of it, we're still not neglecting the basics. We're still squatting, we're still horizontal pushing, we're bridging, and we're pulling. Again, the reps have sort of come down, so the intensity is right up there compared to, let's say, in that work capacity where it's upwards of 10 to 12 reps, we're now nearly at half that. So that intensity is high, but the volume is much lower. Then in terms of exercise selection, okay, so what's in your toolbox? As you can see, from stage 1 to 4, that programming hasn't really changed much, okay? In terms of what we tweak in intensity, we tweak rep ranges, and we tweak load, and that's all we basically really need to do to develop good athletes. I'm sure you've been all over your social media where you see mad stuff, all this, and I think that might work. But what we tend to do as an organization is we'll stick to stuff that we know that works, and we'll develop good athletes and good rugby players. Okay, so as you can see there, maximum benefit, minimal risk. All we sort of can say here is that you need to trust the process. In terms of everything that we do, there's a reason behind it, and there's a reason why we're not doing all those mad exercises and we're sticking to our regular stuff, because we know it works and we know it develops good rugby players. Then the plan going forward for the next few weeks, obviously we started there on Monday, and we're going to get one session for the lads, one session for the girls. Hopefully then a smooth transition back to lockdown whenever that does happen. Hopefully we'll get some more stuff like this going, and yeah, back to the gym once everything allows it. After that then I think it's just if you have any questions.
Hi, Mark. There, I have a question in relation to the power work there.
Yeah.
What's the evidence base that you're not doing it till their training age is higher or chronologically they're older? Is there something out there that says it's a negative?
In terms of why we wait that long, why we do that is basically they have to have a level of strength to be able to do that in the first place. Okay. Obviously power is work done over time. So they have to have a bit ability to produce force in the first place. So if they haven't gone through that stage 1 to stage 3, they don't have the strength base to be able to do that power stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and then my other question would be, you were talking about the maturation of maybe one 15-year-old against another 15-year-old for strength work and maybe putting on load. What's the word I'm looking for? It's irrelevant of age. It's just if one guy was more mature or one girl was more mature than another one, it's okay to load them.
I wouldn't. It's not necessarily purely on maturation. It's their training age, so how long they've been doing it, rather than their maturation. Not necessarily their biological age either. What we will obviously, whenever they come into us, you're literally starting from day one. Now, if we say that they are well able to do that thing, we might be able to accelerate that, but we're not going to first day in the gym put them under a bar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
No worries. Time. So they have to have a